Hi, everybody. Welcome to tonight's amazing program. Tonight is program share number 89 with Let's Get Real and Coach Menachem Bernfeld. I want to thank everybody for coming here on this beautiful Sunday, warm night, midwinter vacation. I'm assuming everybody's home, so you might as well come to the share. What else is there to do? So we're going to get into a very interesting share tonight. Again, I want to thank everybody. Again, the share is all done by people that come and post it on different chats and to their family, WhatsApp statuses. And people let people know about it, and it's Chazik tremendous amount of people. So this is your share. We're all here tonight because of you. And we're doing it for everybody. We're doing this together. As Rabbi Binyamin, Dr. Binyamin Tepper's father calls the share, Rabbi Moshe Weinberger, Sichos Chaverim, and we're gonna try to really get into it tonight. Again, if anybody wants to join, every Sunday I send out the WhatsApp statuses, the flyers. Please WhatsApp me personally at 848-525-0066, 848-525-0066. Save my number on your phone, and every Sunday morning I will send you the flyer. You can join. And as I say every week, not every share is for everybody. Tonight's definitely not for everybody. Tonight's off the charts, but it's deep and it's knowledgeable, and we have a lot to talk about. So we'll get into that soon. For those that are watching the replay of this on YouTube, please click on the like button for Coach Menachem Bernfeld. Click on the subscribe button every Monday. What is it, around 2 a.m., 3 a.m. Menachem goes to sleep after he finishes learning. He uploads the share so everybody can get it and they can know what's coming on. I want to first thank all our advertising sponsors, the Lakewood Scoop here for promoting us here in Lakewood, New Jersey. Special thank you to Rabbi and Yaniv from Chazak for promoting us on the Chazak channels. We appreciate it. A special thank you to Chayla Kaufman and Shmuel Summer from JCN, the Jewish Content Network, for always promoting us across all the Jewish digital platforms. We appreciate that. And Menachem and the Coach Menachem Show is collaborating with OK Clarity to bring greater health and wellness to the Jewish community around the globe. OK Clarity is the online platform for mental health support in the Jewish community. OKClarity.com, you'll find the best therapists, coaches, nutritionists, engage in forums, and stay inspired. The links will be emailed after the show from Coach Menachem. Again, for all those that are here for the first time tonight, every Sunday night we do this at 9:30 Eastern time, and tonight is share number 89. So we're doing this for a while. We're almost hitting 2 years, Menachem. Remember when Menachem started, he was all black. Now, 2 years later. So Baruch Hashem, we're doing this for a while. Next Sunday, February 6th, we have an amazing share with Reb Chaim David Stark from Israel, the Mashgiach of Center Yeshiva, discussing Kedusha in our generation, thriving in an unfiltered world. It's going to be a deep, deep conversation about Kedusha, Shmiras, obviously eyes, your heart, soul, like really how to really stay in that very holy place. If anybody, please tell people about the program. It should be a very deep and meaningful program. He's waking up 4:30 in the morning to come. So it should be amazing. Tonight we have the schus and honor of having Rabbi Yamin. You're not the first time here, you're the second time. And we always say, it says in the Gemara that when a guy says Eidos, Kivit Shehigid, Shuv Chayzer Magid. But over here, since you're so good, we love you. We want you to come back again. So we're happy that you came back. And he's an amazing therapist. He's big in the field. We're going to get to him in a minute. Let's open up with opening words from Coach Menachem Bernfeld. Menachem, what are we talking about tonight?
We'll find out. Welcome, everyone. Let's get real with Coach Menachem, Baruch Hashem. We have the schus to have Rabbi Binyamin Tepper back tonight, and tonight is a very interesting topic. From doing a little bit of research, it is very fascinating. So when you mention the word psychedelic, everybody has a different reaction, and from the feedback that we got back, you see everybody's coming from a different place. Many have no clue what you're talking about, and others think they know everything about it. But I'm sure we're going to learn tonight much more and to be a little bit more knowledgeable. And I believe some people are scared. It sounds like a drug. And what are we doing here? But I think we're discussing tonight legal things in a therapy room with a therapist, with a doctor. So it's not you do whatever you want. Many people, before they take any medication, they say a tefillah, that they know the medication is not what's going to help them. It's Hashem is there to help. Like last week's parsha, you learn out that we're allowed to go to doctors. Yes, we need to daven to Hashem, and Hashem sends these things to us, so we should daven, but He gave us permission to go seek out doctors to help us. And before taking the pill, many say at tefillah, Hashem should help that it should do what it needs to do. The interesting thing tonight is we're going not so much from the physical realm, more the emotional realm, talking about being able to take something that's going to help for emotions, for deep, real people who go through trauma or addiction. And many times it takes a long time in therapy. And with this, it sounds like, again, we're going to hit tonight. I don't know much, but it sounds like there is something there. There is a process that works, and they're doing the research. And we really have to thank Hashem. You know, there are many people that live in dark places. Now, if you don't understand that, thank Hashem for that. But to be able to get out, people can be living with depression, anxiety, or real emotional illness for a very long time. And if this can take them out, we should thank Hashem. And again, thank you very much, Rabbi Yom, for being here tonight. And this is what we're going to hear. Mitch, to understand how it works and if and for who. So thank you for being with us.
Rabbi Nachum, for a beautiful opening. Again, tonight is an interesting topic. I'll give you my overview and then we'll get into it. I really didn't know anything about this topic. It's the last month or so, I got a little bit into it. I did a little research, very minimal. I still don't understand it. And I just know in the therapy world, between the therapists, I know a lot of therapists are here tonight. And I know that Rabbi Yamin is presenting by the Nefesh, by the therapy thing, to discuss this. This is one of the biggest things that are happening right now in the therapeutic world, this type of medication. And it's not something new from my understanding. It's already been around for who knows how many years. But now it's like coming around about, and there's, again, we'll get into it. There's amazing studies and things that are happening. And Rabbi Yamin is actually on the front line of it. And I know we're just got to be open-minded. I'm coming here tonight open-minded. I want to understand it. I want to really get it. And I think it is a new frontier. We named this year New Frontiers. I think that's where we're holding with this. So it should be amazing. I'm going to read your bio, Rabbi Yamin, and then the opening is yours. Dr. Yamin Teffer, PhD. Dr. Yamin Teffer, PhD, CSAT, is the founding director of Arbor Incentives, an intensive outpatient program in IOP located in Brooklyn, New York. The center specializes in providing cutting-edge integrative treatment for trauma, behavioral health, emotional wellness. He also maintains a private practice in Cedarhurst, New York, Brooklyn, New York, and Lakewood, New Jersey. Yamin, thank you so much for offering your time for everybody tonight and coming here. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I first want to acknowledge the courage, the willingness of covering a topic like this, because in the therapy world, it's something that is definitely very hot and very common and really starting to be explored by a broad range of different modalities and different specialties, but for the public, it's starting to get out there, and just as a platform, this show, the willingness to be on the front lines of issues takes courage, but you're bringing, I think, what can potentially be a lot of useful knowledge to certain people, and may very, very well help change lives, help heal lives, and that's the point that tonight is about. We must start just for a moment or two by first of all, I want to just say I'm entering in this with trepidation, in the sense that I want to convey that whatever we discuss tonight really has to be understood with responsibility, with sensitivity, rather than just feel like there's a free-for-all with the modalities that we're going to discuss tonight. It's a very, very just sensitive, fragile, delicate things that we're going to talk about tonight. So don't leave off in the middle. Don't only hear the first half or take things out of context, but you have to really take the full picture in mind. The other thing is we have to talk for a moment and understand the world of trauma. Although tonight is not about trauma, it's about the treatment of trauma. We can only understand that in that context. And I'm going to read 4 sentences that I think encapsulate trauma. It's hard to put it all in. It can be its own share, it can be its own discussion for days. But there's a small anecdote in a very, very deep book written by Rabbi Lau called Out of the Depths. And he has a story in that book where he says that when he was very young and he was in Buchenwald and it was being liberated, he said during the excitement of that time, there were blasts of gunshots from the guard tower. He said one of the shots that were fired hit the clock above the above the camp gate, stopping the hands of the clock at 3:15. That was the time he remembers as a young boy. He said years later, on January 1991, he said, I went to visit the camps again on one of these tours. And to my surprise, I found that the clock handles stood at 3:15. This is, close to 50 years later. And if you want to understand what trauma is, that story to me encapsulates it, because it means that time moves on. The clock moves, it doesn't stop for anything and anyone. But in a certain way, when a person goes through and lives through a traumatic experience, to them, there's also a freezing of a clock, that they stay in a certain way, stuck in that, they stay stuck in that story, and they stay stuck in that moment and in that experience. And it happens on so many levels. On the level of their thinking, there are memories, there are flashbacks that they have to live with. Feelings-wise, their bodies stay stuck in a very, very frozen, survival, hypervigilant state, or in a very dissociated, disconnected, under-feeling, under-aroused state. The view of the world, of themselves, is very stuck. Usually they take blame because that gives them a sense of control. And then by taking that blame, they'll have a negative view of themselves stuck from that time. The relationships are stuck. They can't trust people. They can't trust themselves. So there's something that stays frozen because of that experience. And in that context, I want to talk now tonight about this new, but not so new, modality called psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. Now, what are we talking about when we talk about psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy? So what we're talking about is that usually when someone goes to a therapist's office, to a psychologist, a social worker, a coach, a mental health professional, you sit there and you're able to open up and discuss. But when we're talking about many issues, for example, traumas, deep-rooted things that are very difficult for a person to access, you may access the words, or she may access the words, but to get beyond the defenses and the feelings and to really open up and access and heal and change, very often our ego stands in the way. What they started to realize in the 50s already, Stan Grof and some of his colleagues already were doing this work. They started to realize that by giving certain psychedelic-assisted hallucinogens, what was happening was there were people that couldn't break out or couldn't access or couldn't discuss, couldn't heal, move past certain things that happened in their lives. And then by being under the influence of this, and then being in therapy while being under the influence of this, so we'll discuss in a few moments how to do that, then by discussing these things without the defenses holding back certain feelings and not accessing the full trauma, but under the safety of the feeling of such a substance, without the inhibition, they were able finally to access, to release, to discuss, and then ultimately to move past and to heal. And we'll talk about which substances have been used. Some of them are not yet legal, some of them are being researched right now. But what ends up happening is, why does this process work? How does it work? How does it happen? So there's something at the core of what happens. There's something called the dissolution of the ego, which means that there are certain substances that are able to access parts of the brain and shut down the ego of the brain, which means there is that filter, this view that we use in our brains without even realizing it, our conscious self, that keeps things guarded, keeps things under control, filters things out, that helps us survive. What happens with these substances, that part of the brain, the ego, shuts down, and because of that, a few things happen. One of them can be, there's non-duality. Suddenly the person feels like he is one with the universe, because the ego is what separates. There's an I. There stops being an I. So one of the feelings are, it's a very mystical experience where a person becomes one with the world, one with nature, one with other people. That's number one. very often there's a death experience where the person, since there's no I, the person felt like they were going through something, that they were dying in that experience. That's another experience that can happen during psychedelic experience. But there's also one of awe, where there's something that hasn't been experienced, that hasn't been felt. Now, why is this therapeutic? What does this do? So there are different explanations, and we'll get to a lot of this in some questions and answers, but there's something called a default mode network, which I want to just explain very briefly. Our brains usually work with predictions. We have patterns, the way we think, the way we see the world. We already have a narrative, who, what, how, when. And that's very useful for us because we'd be overloaded by information. But when we're dealing with trauma and the default mode network is stuck, or we're dealing with certain patterns of depression or addiction or anxiety, what happens is we're in a destructive default mode network. The pattern, the prediction has already been ingrained, and the grooves in our brain are working in that way. What happens here is like, they have the snow, a little ball where all the little pieces, you shake it up and it floats up and then it resettles. What happens when the ego is shut down, the default mode network is shut down. And then there's a tremendous potential. There's a tremendous potential that we're able to, right now, in a brand new way, break patterns, and then we're able to see things in a very, very, very different way, in a very new way, in a very healing way, that is able to really, for the very, very first time, break those old patterns and start something, the potential for something very, very new. And that happens in therapy. That's number one. Number two is we're able to access, hold on 1 second. You're able to access going back to memories for the very, very first time that you were too guarded, but under these drugs, you're able to do them, revisit them, whether you are trying to revisit them or not, they come up and you're able to re-access them, but in a whole new healing way, in a calm way, because you don't have those defenses, and therefore healing is able to come out in a whole different way. Another things that happen is that the brain is able during that experience to really make brand new connections. So when you come out, you're able to have that trauma, but it's connected to different resources, different supports that are going on. So it's just a very, very mysterious experience. But what the research is showing is that after these sessions, people who've had PTSD, depression, addiction, they are coming out of these sessions, but in a healed way that they weren't able to access for many years in therapy. It's not a magic bullet. It has its own challenges, like we'll discuss, but there's a tremendous, tremendous potential for healing that comes out. So that's my short introduction, but I'm happy to open and elaborate on so many of these different pieces. I want to even share with you, one small anecdote that will, I think, put it into some perspective. I was doing a session, and this individual who was going through the therapy had lost a very, very, very close dear friend years back, and like all grieving and all mourning, it stays in the heart. And for this individual, that was something that he never ever was able to really properly let go. And this was a ketamine-assisted therapy session. Ketamine is the one substance right now that is officially legal. You can use it as a psychedelic. It's not a traditional psychedelic. That's the only one right now that can be used off-label for psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. So we were doing a session, and then as the session was over, he said he was a friend for years. There was a river, and he was standing next to the river, and he said in the river suddenly he saw this friend that he hadn't seen and that he'd been grieving in the morning, and he said he had reached out his hand and this friend was there, and he said it was the most warm, loving moment he had ever seen. This is where his brain went, and they reached out, they touched each other, and then in the in this experience, he took a fruit and he sort of put it in the river, and his friends floated away and held the fruit that he had given the friend. And then he came out of this experience saying, I just feel at peace. I feel at peace, like this friend received what he needed to receive. I received what I needed to receive. Now, what is this? Why does this make sense? On an emotional level, this person just had this deep, profound emotional experience that was healing for him. And he was able to move on now. So that's an example of somehow part of the mystery of why something like this can help and work.
Okay, Rabbi Yama, we have a lot of questions people want to ask and a lot of questions,
Yeah.
a lot of clarity we need. So thank you for the opening. We're going to take a poll. We're going to see what we're dealing with, what people think. This is like a little bit hard to, process, but we're going to do it together, okay? Sichas Chaverim, together. Here we go. Okay, everybody on the share tonight, we have 3 poll questions. We want to really get to the bottom of this. First question, are you familiar with what psychedelics are and what they can be used for? Yes, no, not sure, and I would really like to hear more tonight. So those are 3 options. So, option B, should psychedelics become legal for use in therapy? Yes, no, not sure. Third question, do the rewards of psychedelics outweigh the risks? So again, somebody who's familiar with this and is reading up on it, if you are, do you believe the rewards, again, there's risks involved, do they outweigh the risks, the rewards? Yes, no, I don't know. So 3 questions. Everybody answer. Okay, give you guys 5 seconds to answer. So, gentlemen, I think we'll start off with a live and see where that leads us. And we have a lot of questions to really clarify. But start with that. Okay, so I'm going to share the poll with everybody. Here we go. Okay, the first question, are you familiar with what psychedelics are and what they can be used for? 30% of the people know tonight what we're talking about. 31% of the people have no idea what we're talking about. And 38% of people are not sure and would like to hear more. So most people here tonight, 69% of the people here tonight are really not familiar with it at all. It's very good to know that. And the second question, should psychedelics become legal for use in therapy? 36% of people say yes, only 2% of people say no. 62% of people are not sure. I think it's the same 60-some%. They don't know what it is. And the third question, do the rewards of psychedelics outweigh the risks? And obviously, the third answer is going to be the winner because most people are not familiar with it. So the answer, 23% yes, 3% no, and 74% not sure. So we have a very clear, most people here tonight are not familiar with it. So we definitely want to clarify what it is. We have live?
Yeah.
Okay, so if we're going to start off with the first live 1 or 2 questions, then I have a lot of questions I want to get to clarify. Okay, you're on.
Hi, Dr. Tepfer. Thank you for taking my question. I've been through different traumatic experiences in life, and Baruch Hashem, I've started doing regular psychotherapy, which I feel is going to help me release a lot of my negative emotions, which have been there for a long time. I actually feel it's being matzliach and successful. I just wanted to know, in terms of this new psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, would you usually, just as a general question, obviously every case is different, but someone that has a different type of therapy like mine, would you suggest they look into this also? Is there anything they could benefit from psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, or is it more of a last resort? I know my thing might take a long time, or like maybe this thing would make it shorter. Is there any benefits that psychedelic assisted psychotherapy could be there even if someone's doing another modality?
Right. Excellent question. So it's very hard to say. If a person is right now in a therapy and they're progressing and they're doing well, then I would stick with that right now, and I would work with what's working, even if it's slow, because psychedelic psychotherapy can also be a slow process. It's a very intense experience that a person has, but it has to then be worked through over time afterwards as well. So if something is working, then I would stick with there's a lot of other ways that are wonderful that get to a lot of the same core points that are covered in psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. So it's not a must that a person has to do this. At this point currently, since it's so new, then I would say it's being used more for people who are really hitting walls and are stuck, where other modalities really aren't getting them to where they need to go. That's how it's being utilized these days.
Thank you.
So, can we just like maybe let's like a little bit hyper clarify. At what point, again, if somebody's in therapy, they're doing well, they see progress. Somebody's in therapy and they're not doing well. They have a traumatic situation. Somebody was molested. Somebody was in a car accident. What's the barometer, sort of, that you know that maybe this is something that would make sense? Let's play it out a little bit.
Yeah. So you have an individual who, let's say, has a sexual trauma or a series of them, and is really at a place that's very stuck. They've tried so many different things and really have not gotten anywhere. It's hard for them to access the trauma, or even if they have, they haven't been able to feel any movement. So then I would very strongly consider at this point, if you can get into a trial of an MDMA, those are very hard to get into. So the only legal one is the psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. What that means is you would come to a therapist who's trained in ketamine assisted psychotherapy, and you would be doing a bunch of sessions with that therapist for that person to get to know your story and to learn about the trauma. And then you prepare for a ketamine assisted psychotherapy session. And in that session, what happens is with the medicine that's given and the therapist that understands how to run that session and how to set it up, the set and the setting has to be done where that person is going to have a very deep inward experience. What will end up happening almost always is the brain will go where it needs to go during that session under the medicine, and that those sessions usually last 3, 4, 5 hours. The medicine usually kicks in around 30 or 45 minutes in, and then most often what will happen in that inward experience is that person will then go back with the music playing, with usually their eye shades on, and they will have pictures and images of things that they went through, and it will be accessed in a way that is for the very first time in their life going to be a brand new experience. They'll go back. For example, we had a session a couple of weeks ago where the girl who had a story of sexual history has been through so many therapies, and she went back, and we for around 45 minutes straight was in a dark room, and the perpetrator was coming, and she was talking all this out, and then she would go back to being in a supportive, safe place with a friend of hers at the water, and then she would go back to the trauma. And what was happening in her brain is she was integrating that trauma with resources, with support, and then she was one with the universe. So her brain was literally going back to the memories, the traumatic memories she needed to go to, she could never get to in other therapy sessions. But under the medicine, where her brain went without the ego standing in the way, was to these traumas. But then you don't just go to the traumas, you go to the traumas from a calmer place, and then you start linking the traumas to different resources or to these big, amazing, universal, mystical type of things. And therefore the trauma itself is put into this larger context rather than staying in a very stuck, small, narrow place. Now, does that mean that she left the therapy session healed? No, that means that then she then can do integration sessions where she can then talk for weeks and sometimes months about that session, about these new views, these new feelings that she had from those traumas. And the therapy sessions after that allow her to talk in so much more of an open way because she accessed that trauma for the very, very first time. So that's a little bit of a picture of where psychedelic assisted psychotherapy can be, life-saving.
Okay, there's a live question now. We'll do a live, but afterwards, a lot of people are asking. I really want to have like a little short course. Obviously, we know that ketamine is an approved legal drug to administer today, but there are a lot of drugs that are still on trial. And there's a lot of famous ones, LSD. There's a lot of other ones. But get a little like crash course of what they do and the difference between them, even though they're not legal. Just understand it maybe better. People don't know what you're talking about. Are you talking about Tylenol, extra strength? Like, let's be more specific what we're talking about. And what's the difference between that and also the typical antidepressants, Zoloft, all the basic stuff that people have been using for the last 50 years?
Yeah.
How is it so much different? So can we get to that in a minute?
Sure.
Okay.
Let's get to that. Yeah.
Okay, you're live. Let's do the live question. Hi. Unmute yourself. She was unmuted before. Hi.
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 Okay. My question is for somebody that has a long history of addiction, one of them being a very long alcohol addiction, who's now sober, but now suffers from not being able to go on any form of brain altering medication, like let's say to help with his depression. And he's the type of person that doesn't really believe so much in therapy. Would this be something that would be, like, in terms of the hallucinogenic effect of it, is it something that he could be able to handle and it would be okay for him?
Right. Why can't he go on brain altering medications?
So what we've discovered is as he, like I said, a very long history of alcohol and narcotics misuse. He now, if he ever has like anything like alcohol or anything that's brain altering, it makes his brain very foggy and very spotty, and he can't focus. He's nearly gotten into accidents from it. I think it's either a withdrawal symptom or I don't know the exact science behind it, but there's definitely some connection to what it's done to him.
Yeah. So,
Can you like just clarify her question because not everybody heard it? It was a little-
So the question was, someone who has, it seems like sensitivities to brain altering substances because of his history of alcohol, should he be doing or can he do psychedelic assisted psychotherapy for depression or other things? The answer is you have to be very, very careful, and the screening to make sure that a person is a good candidate for it. It really has to be done very meticulously. In a case like this is a very brain altering experience, and it would sound like if there's a fogginess and if there's issues that he has whenever he has anything that stimulates the brain, he may not be someone who would make sense for to do a treatment like this. And other therapies which touch on a lot of the aspects that are healing in psychedelics may be a better option for him. That also give a broad, well, psychotherapy, mindfulness, meditation, EMDR, they're all working on changing patterns in the brain in many different ways. Psychedelics are just one form, a very powerful form, but I think that someone like him, again, without knowing other details, it may be more responsible to go that other route.
Dr. Yeaman, let's get into this now very clearly. Let's talk about all the medications that are out there. Obviously, the only one that's legal is ketamine, but we do know you list what they are and what the differences are.
Sure.
And then, like what she said, I want to bring up also that I think people also don't understand. Obviously, you understand severe emotional, but what about a person who's addicted to drinking, a person who has other gambling issues? Like, let's get a little crash course.
So some of the most common substances.
Psychedelics for dummies.
Yeah. So some of the most common substances we're dealing with. Number one, we'll start with psilocybin, which is also called magic mushrooms or mushrooms. It's really the most classic form of a psychedelic. There's a lot of research being done on psilocybin because that research is very, very common in terms of, number one, terminally ill. Johns Hopkins, NYU, they did fascinating studies where they had people who were feeling very, very obviously depressed and no point in life after being diagnosed with different terminal illnesses. And then they did studies where they gave these people these psilocybin pills, and these people had experiences where they again became one with the universe. The ego, there was almost like a death rehearsal experience, and what they found was it blew them away. Better than any antidepressant, better than any anti-anxiety medicine, these people who were terminally ill had this new profound view of themselves, their lives, and the days that they had left, and the depression levels went so significantly down for these people that the psychiatric departments in these hospitals were blown away. They've never seen results like that. And therefore, that's something that's being heavily researched right now. It's legal in Amsterdam, I believe, not in the United States, unless you're in an actual trial. But that's something that's moving forward in terms of legality and the research. The other common used psychedelic is MDMA, ecstasy, and that is being used for trauma work. And that's the most heavily researched and the furthest along, as far as I know, in terms of legality. They think they're around 2 years away. MAPS is an organization. They think they're around 2 years away now from getting it cleared to be used for trauma. The way MDMA works is it's a heart-opening medicine, which means it's not a typical psychedelic. What happens with MDMA is that the person will go back and revisit different traumatic experiences, but from a very, very emotionally compassionate, self-compassionate way. And they're able to sort of float above that experience, go back to it, envision it, but from a very, very soft and a very, very healing type of way for the very first time. And therefore, they're able to then leave that experience after they have 2 or 3 different sessions with MDMA, feeling about themselves much more resourced, going back to that, but not from a dissociated place, but from a again, compassionate healing type of place. That's another substance that's being used. Ketamine can really work similar to MDMA, similar to psilocybin, depending on the levels that it's being given. So it can be heart opening in the smaller doses, a little bit more psychedelic in its larger doses. There are other substances that are also not being researched as much, but also used. LSD in the 50s and 60s was very heavily researched. I think that is much behind in terms of right now being made legal and researched. That was used heavily for AA for alcohol addiction, and they found very, very astonishing results. But that is something that is the strongest in terms of just the length of time. It'll be 10 or 12 hours versus 45 to 50 minutes, or psilocybin will be 2 hours. MDMA will be around an hour and a half or 2 hours, 3 hours. LSD is dealing with a much longer time period where the person is under this experience. And then there is ayahuasca, which is DMT, that's being used as well. That experience is also one that's a bit different. Often that has a body part to it, where there's part of that experience is taking that medicine in, and then very often the person has to vomit the tea up, and it's a longer experience. The trip that one goes on is somewhat different in these different substances. People react differently to different ones. So it's hard to say how one person is going to react to this one and another person is going to react to something else, but they're sort of grouped slightly differently in terms of their effects. And MDMA is very, very connected to trauma work. Ketamine is also connected to trauma, to depression, to anxiety. Psilocybin is being used for these things as well, along with the terminally ill. That's something that is giving them that experience that's helpful for that, as well as for addictions, as well as for eating disorders. They're trying to use it as to help them. Those are the common psychedelics that are out there. There are many others, but those are the ones that are really being explored the most. I'll leave you with just 2 resources. If those that are interested, you can view a wonderful documentary on MDMA called A Trip of Compassion. I think they have it on Vimeo, which gives you a real in the room experience where they brought the cameras into sessions, and you get to really see what I'm talking about. It's very theoretical now, but where the person's mind can somehow go in that experience with the ego being shut down, and how they revisit traumas, but from that compassionate, heart opened, warmer place, and how healing takes place. And then Michael Pollan wrote a book, How to Change Your Mind, where he goes through the research and a lot of the current studies. Those are two popular resources to get more educated on this and the different substances that are out there. And there was a second half to the question. Sure, I don't know if I covered. So that's how those substances will be used currently.
Okay, Rabbi Yehoman, thank you for that little breakdown. Let's take another live question. Okay, you're on now.
Okay, I wanted to know, like this modality, I'm assuming you're actively using it. Do the clients usually, is this usually coming after other modalities having been tried? And I'm curious also if that's like a common thing. What are the modalities that usually come before this? Let's say you're dealing with trauma. What are the things that you would try first?
Yeah, people who are coming to ketamine are not new to therapy or ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. People have very often been in therapy for years, although it's not a must. But what is a must is that there's a deep connection with the therapist that they're doing this modality with, this psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, that there's a safety, that the person knows their story, is able to create an atmosphere where that session is going to be an inward experience, where they're going to go back versus just being a drug experience. So the way that's done is that those first few meetings, you're going over the life story, you're going over the traumas. When the person shows up for that session, there's a set that's done and a setting that's done. The atmosphere is one where there's music playing that's done without words, that gets the person to go inward. There are certain readings that are meaningful, that get the person to start going to a more emotional place. The person sets intentions for that session. And then when that's done in that type of context, then the person is able to have this deep, profound experience relating to their emotional world. And the brain goes where it needs to during that session, where it's ready to go, accessing what it needs to. But there's no must, you have to go to this therapy or that therapy before. It just has to be done in the context. Then there's integration sessions that have to happen with that therapist after as well, that take the content of what just happened during that session. Often it's remembered right after, but sometimes it takes 2, 3, 4 days for the person to remember all the different things that, oh my gosh, that also happened, that also happened. People react differently under a psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy session. Some people are quiet. They just lie there on the couch with their eyes covered and listening to the music for the 45 minutes, hour and a half. And then they come out. And as they come out, they start to say, oh, this is what I saw. Other people, while they're lying there, talk and say what they're seeing. So both of them can be just as helpful and therapeutic. So it's a different experience for different people.
Could we discuss a little bit of negative side effects?
Yeah, sure. So just as a drug itself, ketamine itself is a very, very safe drug. It's been around since the 60s. It's used right now for anesthesia for children, still till today. Usually the amounts that are given are 800 to 1,000 milligrams. That really gets the person to be out totally, and is able to then, they can perform a surgery on the child. Now, under ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, we're giving them usually 200, 300 milligrams, much, much less. We're trying to find that sweet spot. So we're taking a very safe medicine, and we're giving, like a 20%. And the reason why we're doing that is because we don't want the person to be out. That's not beneficial. We want there to be this sweet spot where the person has the ego that's not, they are present enough to hear, to remember, to be cognizant of and aware and present enough in terms of the visions that they have and the memories that they go back to. So in terms of the medicine, it's safe, but the real thing to be very, very aware of is that these are very, very profound, deep, and sometimes life-changing experience. And a person has to be ready and willing to want to do that. And what I mean by life-changing is for a person to have this death rehearsal experience, or to be one with the universe. And even though you're coming back into the room, it can be a frightening experience, and it can take it's very overwhelming for people, and therefore it has to be prepared well. Even if it's prepared well, it's something that the person then has to integrate into their lives. Now, even though it's helpful for trauma, like we were discussing before, but these are things that often frighten and overwhelm people. And there's a saying: there's no such thing as a bad trip, because that's what the person has to work through. That for what happened in that experience. But still, that's something that isn't a piece of cake. It isn't emotionally necessarily an easy thing.
But there's a reason why this person was not able to go there for many years.
Right.
Now you're saying with this modality, you can take them there in a day or two, and that itself can be very scary for people, or
very frightening,
anxiety provoking.
You're going to cause new trauma.
So right. That's you have to be so cautious and so careful, and the supports have to be there, really in place. Some people will really need a lot of hand holding right after those days, because of what they experience. Now, ketamine, the reason why it's effective is because it allows people to go back, but it calms the system enough in almost all cases that the person goes back, but the person is doing so from a safer, softer, relaxed place, and that lasts usually a week or even two. So therefore, it gives enough space and enough support. The medicine itself allows for the person to go back in a calm type of way. But it's different for people, and there's still something that's always, whenever you go do any trauma work, the resourcing has to be there. And here, even more so. So again, there's been thousands of people right now that have done, let's say, the MDMA studies, all over the country. What they're showing is tremendous in terms of the not re-traumatizing people, but in terms of just the healing that's been for their PTSD symptoms. So all in all, there's strong support that this is not doing more damage than healing, not at all. But still, it's not a magic pill. You're going back to painful stuff, and even if you can do it, you still have to be ready then to it's not a piece of cake. It's not a piece of cake. I trained when I did my training with I was together in the cohort with Bessel van der Kolk, who's a big trauma researcher, and he was saying over that when he did his MDMA, he said that him and his colleague said, just the hundreds of people that he had treated for it was sexual abuse. He said all their cases came flooding back to him in his session. So he was dealing with hundreds of traumas that just the faces and their stories. Now he was going back to it with an open heart, but it doesn't matter. This is still, it's heavy material, and it has to be done. That's why so responsibly and carefully, and with a tremendous amount of support and care and guidance, and but that's sometimes the right and sometimes the most effective way to move forward for many people. So it has to be done with care.
And what does the therapist do actually while the person is an hour and a half? Some examples of the therapist does.
Sure. So it really depends, because you have individuals that are silent and have an inward journey, and the therapist is just there, sometimes checking in every 10 or 15 minutes. How you doing? The person is present enough to be able to say, that's good, I'm fine. Feeling like there's someone there so that they can go into that internal space because they're safe enough. Other people are emotive, are talking, are verbal. It's not just an internal experience. And then the therapist is there listening, writing, and then sometimes giving the support, because sometimes that person will suddenly get scared and overwhelmed. And then that therapist can say, it's okay, you can approach it. It's okay. And then with that encouragement, the person then goes ahead to that scene or that memory, and then it opens it up for them. And then they're able to go to that place that they were scared of, with the therapist's encouragement, and then they're able to access that memory and work it through and heal it. So sometimes they need to be held and supported. Sometimes they do that trip on their own, and the therapist is just there to, again, create that safe place. So it really varies depending on the substance. It depends on the individual. There are certain substances that are done more in group. Ayahuasca is something that, again, I'm not as familiar with that, just for the legality reasons. That's done very often in a group with one or two guides. So that's done more collectively. I'm talking about the ketamine-assisted psychotherapy sessions. They're done, again, almost always one-on-one.
I want to ask one other question. We have a live person 1 second before. I want to ask one question. I mean, it was always, is there that risk of, like, since the mind-altering medication, like, guys, you ever see, oh, this guy, like, his brain twisted, he took mushrooms, obviously he wasn't done with a doctor. When you take some type of medications, aren't there the risk, like, sort of like you cross over into almost like the zombie zone, you don't come back? Is there a risk to that?
Yeah, so there was that, there was a movement, when they went anti-drugs in the late 60s. So there was a lot of, like, commercials, fry your brain and this, but practically speaking, these substances end up having an effect usually for especially when there's a guided person there. But the substances stay in the brain usually, and it depends on the 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and then they're out. Now, when they have to be done with care and they have to be done in the right dosage, and then that's the experience, and the person comes back very much and is there in the room. There aren't, to my knowledge, factual stories where the person, these are safe substances, again, when given correctly, that don't, it's like saying, I don't want to use this as an analogy. If a person drinks alcohol and then it's a stimulant, and then the person is high, is there a story that the person is not coming back from that? No, the alcohol stays in the system, and then the person's brain comes back. So these are again, it's not an exact analogy, but a similar thing. Now, can there be scary trips? And the person's definitely, if the person's alone and the person's not guided, that makes it all the more, so the person can come back and have
Our
scary
story
memories.
that guys that did this and they jumped out the window, they think they can fly. I mean,
Yeah, but we're doing it in an office guided. We even do it with 2 therapists there. 2 therapists are there for the one individual. So the care is taken. Obviously, the person, within 45 minutes, the person's present, and the person. That's not happened as far as I know with any substances. If the person is tripping on their own, like you said, that's not. But we're doing psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. It's a whole different. Experience.
Let's go to the next live question. You're on, Cesar.
Oh, hi. Hi. It sounds like the bottom line is a certain neuroplasticity. I guess you talk about mind altering. Do these like change the brain in some way permanently? I was thinking of last week we had somebody talk about ADHD, and people take medication for that. It could often alter the brain, I guess the wiring of the brain or something like that. Does it, would this do a permanent effect like that? Or is that
so what they say is, the word they use for psychedelic research is like there's an entropy where they do fMRIs on a brain that doesn't have, let's say, any substances, and then they'll use the fMRI on a brain that has, let's say, psilocybin. And what they see is the interconnectedness, the communication across the entire brain is firing so much more when it's under psilocybin than when it's not. Now, does that last forever for a person? The answer is no. But what happens is when under that influence, the person then is making these connections to certain traumas or certain memories that were locked, then forever there's now a new understanding. There's a new link to that memory that was sort of stored as a trauma memory, and now it's felt differently. So not that the entropy lasts forever, but it's that there's an integration and an understanding that and a different experience to that memory than there was prior.
Thank you.
How about this new concept, we've had it on the show many times, childhood emotional neglect, which, you know, people are not always aware of the trauma, and they believe that's, you know, this is life, but it really, they're deep down, the way they grew up, certain things, would this have an effect?
Okay, basically, what you're asking is like something like a trauma that's not like something big, like something that they can't like put their finger on, but they feel.
Not real, yeah, it's not a real a big event. It's just the lack of needing what you need to grow up.
Yeah. So
So
to
it's
answer
always
the question,
the father's and mother's fault, you know.
Nobody's fault.
Right. Yeah. So and what we see is it's not just for specific traumas, and what we're finding is that this is for anxiety, depression as well. That the reason these psychedelics really change people, again, not a miracle and not a magic bullet, but they can really have a profound effect, is because similar to even with what you're talking about, the complex trauma, complex PTSD, not a specific event, but more of a an upbringing of neglect, or is that when there's ego disillusionment, when there's just a real potential for the brain to just reconnect itself in different type of way, where it doesn't have that old pattern, where there's an ability to just look at things, feel about things a new way, and it's open to that. It's open to that during that session, and then they come out with like they had an experience where they didn't have that pattern, and then from there they're able to sometimes just revisit or create new connections in their brain from that experience that isn't just a continuation of how they thought about and saw the world. One of the analogies I remember reading was the people that went to the moon, the astronauts that were there. They said they stood on the moon and they saw the Earth just from like this whole new vantage point, right? If you can imagine, like we're living on Earth, but if you see the Earth from there, and they said that just perspective changed how they felt about themselves, about life, right? Because they were seeing Earth. If you think about it for a second, it's profound. You're looking at life, but from this new vantage point, and that's sort of, you get this experience of seeing yourself without that just predictable pattern of the default of how you always experience yourself, your thinking, your world. And that can just have a profound effect on people, that there's this just experience that then gives them a perspective that they're able to somehow break out of old patterns and feel about themselves, feel about their emotions, feel about the world, feel about the people that they love in a different type of a way. There's a oneness to the world, that the ego is not there, that then gives people sometimes this 180, that they just again see things in a different and feel about themselves in a different type of a way. Is this a magic bullet? Is it as simple as I'm saying that people just leave this? I'm sorry, people just leave this, and my camera just knocked off. I'm sorry. A second. And there we go. And the answer is no. The answer is it's not as simple as that. But because even those views, even those feelings end up fading away. If you think about it, some of the connections of the trauma memories are able to last. The research shows 6 months, 12 months later. But to stay in that pattern needs upkeep. So some people will do ketamine sessions. They'll do 6 or 8 of them in a few months, and then once a month they'll follow up just to be able to maintain some of this. The MDMA work is being done in 3 or 4 sessions. They're seeing lasting results, at least for specific traumas that the person went through 6 and 12 months later, without any continual MDMA sessions. So depends on the person. It depends on the drug, but there's just what they're seeing is this profound potential in this area in terms of treatment. Still very, very early in the field. The research is just coming out, but the research that's coming out, legitimate research from the top researchers in the country, is that there's really, really profound results and amazing potential for this.
Let's go to the next live question. Okay, you're on. Hi.
Hi. Okay, so my question is as follows. I'm very aware of, I've read a lot and wrote a lot on psychedelics, but my question is from a metaphysical perspective. Obviously, specifically ayahuasca, but many of them are used kind of in an avodah sort of process. And also, even if we would assume that that was unnecessary for the effect, question is this, do we have any way of knowing if this is real? I mean, obviously that's the $1 million question, but if metaphysically, if someone is going somewhere or if it's just in their mind, if it is there a concern that this is, you know, Nicholas Lapardis or Lomas Yoinem or anything like that? And do we need to ask that question before we do it? Because that's the thing, you know, having done a lot of research on this, that's the thing I'm concerned about.
Yeah.
I just want to add one more question on top of this, because people have asked the question. What about people want to come closer to Hashem? They want to come and they use this, and somebody wrote a letter to the rabbi, I forwarded it to you. You know, that they were taking LSD in the 1950s. They felt that they connected the Eibishter much closer when they're on LSD. There's a certain spirituality that it brings you, because it takes away your yeshus, so you can connect to God on a much higher level.
Yeah. So to answer that, I think you're alluding to a letter of the Lubavitch Rebbe, and I think that Rav Soloveitchik was also asked, the Rav, you know, from why he was also asked, and he answered the same thing without, I think, knowing that Lubavitch Rebbe. I think that it's clear the way of Yiddishkeit, the way of Judaism, is that it's through the hard daily work of learning, of davening, of working on our midas, of a lifetime of Avodas Hashem that brings us close to Hashem. And of course, we have moments through davening, hopefully, and through singing, or through the ways that we've had. But to use these substances as our spiritual experiences has generally not been the way of our Masar, of our tradition, and that's not been. And if you look at what these Gedolim have answered, they've answered along those same lines. That's not the legitimate spiritual experience that we're looking for. We're looking for ones that come through, again, years and years of a lifetime of effort. In terms of where the person goes, we're trying to use this in a very medical and psychological way to heal people from depression and trauma, and that's the way that it's being used. So to say, where does the person go and is it real? I can't. The person, of course, is going in their own mind. This is, where does a person go in their dreams? There's a deep, subconscious or place that a person is able to go in their imagination, and that's what's happening with these substances, where the person is going deep into their own minds when the ego is not there, and there's visions and there's experiences and there's feelings that are happening. I can't explain it. I don't know if anyone, there's a different explanations as to how this can happen and why this happens, but it's where the mind is able to go when it's when certain parts are stimulated more and certain parts are shut down more. And that, if we do it in the right setting, it's something that's able to heal people who are, again, stuck for many years. So is it something the Rabbanim that I've spoken to in that context of healing people in terms of their traumas have been supportive of it in that kind of context, but I've not seen the support in terms of the spiritual experience there. I have not seen that.
Hi, you're on?
Yeah. Hello?
Okay. Yes, hi.
Hi. So I just had a question for the doctor here. I wanted to know, have you ever experienced the psychedelic experience yourself?
That's a great question. So the answer is to get trained and to be able to administer it. One of the things you have to do is you have to go through in the training the experience yourself. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to ask you a question. Hello?
Yes.
Okay. So the question is, I mean, it sounds to me like, why shouldn't everybody do it? I understand you don't have to be severely emotionally, I get that. But what's the worst case scenario? You try it, you see a new experience, you get to see how your brain functions without that part that holds you back. I'm sure everybody can gain from doing it. Like, why shouldn't everybody do it?
Yeah. So to answer the question, I don't. It's like, you can ask also, why should everyone go to therapy? Should everyone do psychedelics? I think that the role of certain things, why shouldn't everyone go on an anti-anxiety medication? Why shouldn't everyone go on antidepressants? If it doesn't hurt, it doesn't. No, and the answer is that I think things have to always be used with and needed, and there's also, if there's no medical psychological need for it, then I don't think it's what I would advise anyone to pursue and to do. I personally, people ask me all the time. I don't think it's recreational. People do feel differently than I do, but my position on it is that it has its place in a healing capacity, and aside for that, I think is overusing its role. I think that there are other ways to relax. There are other ways to enjoy. There are other ways to have recreation. To start getting into the brain and to alter it and to have these deep experiences as a casual thing, I don't think is its purpose, is its place, and is personally is not the right responsible way. I think a person's opening themselves up to, again, deep experiences that are some of them are unsettling, some of them can be overwhelming. Why should a person do that if it's not in the context of a very, very specific, significant reason of healing? So that's my take on it.
Okay, let's go to the next live question. Say you're up.
Hi. Someone who is in an essay, Psychedelic Anonymous, and he's working the steps, and the question is if it's helpful. It could be helpful for him to help him with addiction, and if yes, is it rather to when he's working the program or after he finish after a year or after a while?
Yeah. So for addiction, again, it's a very similar thing. Early on in the 50s and 60s, the psychedelics were being used for addiction. The big Bill W., who was the founder of AA, had his spiritual experience in the hospital, where he then started the whole 12-step movement. It was on I think they call it belladonna. I don't even know how to. There was a psychedelic experience that he was given in the hospital, and he wanted LSD to be part of the 12-step program. There were letters between him and Carl Jung early on, if they should include LSD as part of the program or not. So there's an old history of psychedelics with recovery. So to answer your question, there is a big place for it. They're using some of the researches about psilocybin, but that's not legal yet. Ketamine itself is tricky because although ketamine doesn't have physical addictive qualities to it, like other substances like cocaine and heroin, but people have an addictive personality, especially if they've had issues with substances. You have to be very, very careful if you're going to give them ketamine. Other Other psychedelics are less problematic in terms of that, but again, the legalities, they're not there yet. So to answer your question, the person doesn't have to wait if they're doing ketamine specifically a year, program not. It's something that if they don't have an addiction to substances, that's something that they can be that they can gain from if they want to go back and do this work in terms of trauma work and have that a part of their program. But if things are going well and they're doing well, then I wouldn't say that this is a must, or that I would even recommend it. I'm talking about if people are really hitting walls in terms of their trauma work. That's when I would say to strongly consider to use something like this.
Okay, Murray, Rabbi Yoma, let's go to the next live question. You're on. Go.
Hey, good evening. So my question is, so I know these psychedelics are all beautiful and it takes you to different realms and the oneness and all.
Unmute.
Okay, there you go.
Did you hear the start of the question?
Yeah, they take you to these realms, right?
Yeah, so, but at the end of the day, when you experience that, you get opened up to a lot deeper mind thinking and knowing, and there's risk to that as well. Based on what you decide if a patient or a person is ready to be entered into those psychedelics or not.
Yeah. Well, I don't decide anything. If a person is very interested and reaches out and wants to do this type of work, then I explain to them what the work is and exactly what you're talking about, what the benefits are, what some of the challenges of the work are going to be. And it's people who decide if they want to do this or not. I don't decide for anyone. And if people want to do it, you're very right. These are very profound experiences. They're cosmic, they're mystical, and the person has to be very aware that that's what they're going to be experiencing, very likely, not everyone, but and they choose to do that.
So people are not aware, they want to hear from the professional before they do anything. So how do you explain it to them?
Oh, so I sit down and I explain to them all the different parts of what we go through every step, what very likely is going to be the experience. There's very often in a ketamine experience, a person becomes one with nature. There's non-duality. What that means is the person then feels like they are a tree. So then they don't exist and they are the wood, or they are a blade of grass, or they are the blood rushing through veins, or they are shapes, they turn into a square or a triangle, or they become a star, they're one with the universe, or they're flying through the depths of the ground. The experiences, or they see music, or they start to, there's a crossing over of senses. So that's part of this awe mystical experience. And then what happens is why it's very effective for, let's say, for example, for addiction. One of the explanations is in AA or in SA or in any other addiction programs, they say it's a spiritual disease and you have to connect to a higher power, right? So what happened to Bill W., or what happens to people on LSD, or what happens in these psychedelic experiences is there's this profound, higher power experience. And then it takes the person out of the smallness of their relationship with their bottle and, or their substance. And there's something that's bigger. That's what a big part of AA is about, that. And that's why these psychedelic experiences often go hand in hand, or can support, or can sometimes be the breakthrough, because the person then says, oh, wow, there's something bigger than my little small world that I've contracted myself into with. There's only this one thing. I live for this battle. Wow, I saw this planet. I was one with infinity. I didn't exist. So therefore, there's a bigger, broader purpose to me, to my life, and let me continue living that. And that it breaks through that pattern. That's why it would be something that goes hand in hand with recovery, with AA, and why it did in the early years.
And they feel that way even after they come out.
So what happens is that it's a profound thing that stays with people. Now, it doesn't mean that it doesn't start to ultimately fade and slip away, but the pattern is then broken. So the behavioral pattern then has an opportunity to sort of just restart itself. And even though the experience doesn't stay, that fades then after a few days, a few weeks. But the shift of like there's something more to live for here begins them to in a new trajectory. Does that continue? So it very often does.
How long did that last?
So again, like I told you, the studies on PTSD with MDMA is showing 6 and 12 months later, the trauma is still, the recovery is still there. They're seeing long-lasting effects. In terms of, they don't have a lot of studies with addiction because they did some meta studies from the 50s and 60s. They tried to, and they saw that there was a lot of effectiveness, but they have to do research on it, and they don't have it on addiction. They have it on trauma, they have it on depression, they have it on anxiety, they have it on terminal illness. That's where the results are lasting and significant. That's what they're seeing.
And what do they say? You have to redo it every year?
No, that for example, MDMA with trauma, they're not redoing it. They're giving 3 sessions and sessions before 3 sessions, then they're continuing some psychotherapy, but they're comparing it to control groups without giving it again. And then 6 and 12 months later, since they had these experiences during these sessions, those experiences gave a new connection to those traumatic memories that lasted without follow-up sessions. If you read the researchers out there in terms of the best site to go on is MAPS, M-A-P-S, who they collect all the research for all the psychedelic substances. Rick Doblin is the founder of MAPS, and you can go on their website and see all the current research. They have them all listed for every single substance and for every single disorder.
Rabbi Yeoman, we have a live question next, but before we do it, a few people are asking, most insurance do not cover any of this type of treatment, is that correct?
Correct. There are very few places you can find that really do ketamine-assisted psychotherapy well, and there's a place called Field Trips. That's a clinic. They have a few branches. They have one in New York City. They have one in, I think, a few other cities in the country. They do ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. How they do it, how thorough they do it, you have to look into. There are a few other centers that try to do it. You have to look up. And then there are individual therapists that are trained, that are CAP trained, ketamine-assisted psychotherapy trained, and you can follow up and go to finding out where they are, who they are in research, and get help that way.
Can we get like a concept of price where these things range from? Like, what are we talking about?
So these are usually expensive. They're expensive because we're dealing with a bunch of sessions before. We're dealing with it's usually a 6-hour therapy session. Often there are 2 therapists there for the 6 hours. So you're dealing with they're expensive interventions at this point because there are just so few providers, and because it's just so time intensive. So until it becomes a bit more popular and out there, it's expensive.
In the thousands.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, let's go to the next live question, okay? You're on. Hi, you're on.
Question, would learning Hasidus be on par with the psychedelic usage or Chovos Levovos with Emuna Bitachon? And on the flip side, electroconvulsive therapy that preceded all those psychedelic drugs that you're talking about in the 50s and like that, would they be on par? And instead of doing all this psychedelic drugs.
Yeah. So to answer your question, anything that that a person learns, all therapy, if you think about it, touches on a lot of these things. We're trying to get a person to, all of Yiddishkeit is to get a person to experience that there's a big God that's out there, and that our neshamas are big and infinite and connected to one another. Of course, learning tries to do that. His baininus, meditation. There are many ways that we try to, through davening, that we try to get in touch with a bigger part of ourselves and a bigger part of the world. Of course, that's all. We have to spend a lifetime trying to access that. 100%. Is that going to heal people, everyone? The answer is no. Unfortunately, people who are wounded need more help than that, and that's the role of these psychedelic medications that are able to help people through medicine and through the therapy together, be able to experience these things that can also through a lifetime of work be experienced through Yiddishkeit. And then ECT is very different. ECT, it's a whole other thing in terms of how it worked and what it was trying to stimulate in the brain. That's not a psychedelic experience, and that's not therapy is not done as a result. That's trying to just stimulate different areas of the brain to help with depression, and that works on a very different system.
Let's get to the next question, okay? So much to cover over here tonight. Okay, you're on.
So is the one thing I wonder, is ketamine really that good, or is it just that this is the legal one now? Because looking at it compared to other psychedelics, the effect doesn't appear to last as long. It appears to be more of a disassociative as opposed to psilocybin, LSD, which are more internal. The data seems to be much less in terms of its effectiveness. It appears to have at least some potential for abuse. It appears to be very different than the other ones. And, it seems to last a couple of weeks, and maybe for people with treatment-resistant depression, it can bounce them out of it and maybe give them a chance to work on something more long-term. But it doesn't appear to have the same effect as, let's say a 4 to 6 hour psilocybin session or something like that. And, someone asked before about addiction. I mean, for someone who has heroin addiction or something really serious, Ibogaine is definitely something worth looking at.
Yeah. So, right. It's what I would say is that ketamine, I would correct you. I think that it's a versatile medicine depending on the dosage. So it can act as a very mimicking a psychedelic if it's given in the higher doses. If it's given slightly lower doses, it's similar to the heart opening of an MDMA. It is used. Will it be legal? Will it be as popular after psilocybin? And let's say other substances are ultimately legalized. I think it'll still have its place, but I think that and not only is it the best we have, I think it does I think a wonderful job in terms of the trip, and I think that it also it offers something different. It offers a certain calming experience. A mystical experience that's different than the other ones. I think that they all have their place, and I think people.
I don't know. I mean, the mystical trip that that they've done for terminal cancer patients. I mean, that's all been done with psilocybin. I've never seen them even try anything like ketamine for something like that. And my assumption would be that it's nowhere near as powerful.
Right. I think that you're right. For terminally ill, they're using psilocybin, but I think that if you look, for example, at the research, you'll see that there's strong results with ketamine for PTSD, for depression, and for anxiety as well. But we'll see. For example, psilocybin has its place with terminal illness, but they're using MDMA very strongly for different traumas. I think that
for trauma, MDMA appears to be really good because it can put people in a space where they can relax and relive the trauma, thereby process it. But that's something else. The other question I have is, where does the idea of 6 sessions of ketamine come from? I mean, if you look at psilocybin, it's generally 1 session. MDMA is 2 sessions, 3 sessions. Where does the concept and what's behind the number 6 specifically?
Oh, I don't know anything about the number 6. I've never heard the number 6 specifically, but with ketamine, it's a much shorter experience. So that's why ketamine is more efficient in the sense that it's 45 minutes, an hour session, an hour and 15. They're trying to do the same thing. They're trying to, as far as I know, they're trying to create a version of psilocybin that has a shorter effect that makes it just more practical. But ketamine has that in the sense that it's a shorter acting experience, and therefore it makes it just more efficient and doable, and therefore you may need more sessions in terms of different experiences that are had under it versus psilocybin, which is a longer experience.
Hey. Wow, that was fun. Okay, we have a few more live, and there's a few other things I want to get to. Gentlemen, before we go to the net, was the live on already? Okay, let's go to the live. The live is on. You're on.
Hi, okay. So I wanted to know if there's a minor who's already medicated for ADHD, anxiety, depression, and has been through multiple therapists for trauma, such as abandonment, and has had no progress with multiple therapists, and they have built up a steel wall to not disclose and keep everything bottled up, and they're extremely guarded. Would this be an option for them? And if so, would this be recommended by a therapist, a psychiatrist, by the parents feel? Number one. And number two, it sounds similar to it tapping into a specific part of the brain. And how does this compare to the EMDR approach of therapy? Again, it's with a minor.
Yeah, so with a minor, I would just say off the bat, this is not something I would ever try or recommend, because you're dealing with just these profound experiences. I don't think that's fair to have a minor then incorporate this right after. So that's not something I would recommend for anyone who is at that age. I don't know, minor, whatever it is, 10, 12. Second part of your question, how does this compare with EMDR? EMDR is helping integrate traumatic memories within the brain, whether it's right brain, left brain, whether it's grounding that's being done while they're doing it. But that integration, there are similarities between that and perhaps some of the integration that's being done within the psychedelic experience. With the entropy that's being done in terms of the brain communicating different, larger context to the traumatic to the traumatic event. In that way, I think that there's some overlap to that. Yeah.
Okay, Bjorn, let's go to the next live one. You're on.
Hi. Regarding stories and memories that come up while in the psychedelic experience, how much can they be relied upon? Are they always definitely true if they came up? Like what?
Sure. Yeah. So the answer is no, they're not definitely. There's so much. It's a dreamlike experience. So there are symbols and there are pictures and there are still shots and there are you're going into the world of imagination. So it's not something that's factual. It's something that's effective in terms of the person being able to integrate painful memories. They remember that they were in this horrible accident, and the accident comes back to them, but it comes back from a distance, and it comes back with them being able to somehow visit from an overview of that car, and then in a soft way seeing themselves there, and then feeling like they were cared for and that they survived, and it's okay that they survived, and the other people who didn't are entering into an infinite place, and they feel calm for the first time about that incident, and they come back. So was it factual? Was it not? I don't know. They remember themselves being in the accident, and then they're going back to that accident.
So my question is in regard to a story where somebody, let's say somebody remembers they were molested, and then they doubted afterwards. So would you say that it means that they were or weren't? Like they remember a story?
I wouldn't use it as any fact. I wouldn't, because right. We've had people in ketamine sessions, going through self-harm and killing, and dying themselves. Did they actually ever kill themselves? And no. So it's playing out traumas or parts. It doesn't necessarily mean one thing or the other. No.
Okay, thank you.
Yaman, as a therapist, right? When you're sitting there and the person is on ketamine, like, what's the experience watching somebody who's been through such a trauma? I'm asking you a personal question. You don't have to answer it.
Yeah.
Just like seeing somebody who's been, has been severely emotionally abused or sexually abused, and you're seeing them playing with those emotions. How does it feel for a therapist to see them in such a powerful, walking it out, whether it's true or not, as far as the details of the story? That's not the guy just asked. Let's say the details are not, but they're dealing with it, which is when you're sitting them for years and you couldn't get to some of those points. Like, how does it feel on that part?
Yeah, I'll tell you, as a therapist, sitting there, there's something so profound, something so, I use the word magical, something so otherworldly when you're sitting there with a person who is either accessing or they're going to a place and then they are able to relate to you what they did. You can't describe it in words. It's really something that's extremely profound and humbling to experience, magical to experience. At the training, I sat there with we had 35 people that were doing this, and we had watching many people going through this experience, and I can say that and hearing the traumas that each one of them went to, hearing clients' traumas as they experience it as well, it's something that is hard to put into words, but as a therapist, it's really what you dream of. It's people who see themselves as bigger, as big as they really are. We try to always tell people, wow, you have to believe in yourself. These are people that are experiencing, like, I was, I realized that I'm something that's just so much bigger than I thought, and my story is so much bigger than it was, and this, that the world is really one, and that what I was limiting myself and how I felt about that story, it's really part of this bigger plan. Like, to hear these things and to know that you're watching this take place is something that it's amazing.
You don't need a therapy session afterwards?
Oh, do you need? Yeah, you need many. Yeah.
An interesting question. What would you tell somebody who knows that they went through real trauma when they were young and they've never went back there? It's too scary. They know it has an effect in their life, but they just don't want to go back there. They don't want to touch it. What would you tell such a person?
Yeah. That's not
a guy who's functioning the way he is. Not that he doesn't want to go there and he's depressed and he's
functioning.
He's functioning, but now you're opening up a can of worms that is a kedai to open. That's the question.
Yeah. That's a very personal thing. My general answer to that is you don't have to go back to traumas. There's no mitzvah d'oraisa chiyuv to go back. It's something that you go back as needed. That's my take on it. And if it becomes necessary at some point in the person's life, then at that point let the person go back. To preempt or to say that a person has to, if a person is functioning and life is going on, then let live and let live. I don't think that the people that again would see it differently. That's my opinion. I don't think that a person has to proactively go back. What I'll just tell you, parenthetically, what sometimes does happen is that in the future there are things that happen where there's a loss or there's an experience that happens, and then people for the first time have to are dealing with this new thing that one trauma then brings back and links to other things, and sometimes people have to go back at different points in life because they're facing something. But until then, or even if someone faces something and it doesn't bring them back to that old thing and they're functioning well, so then if they're functioning well enough, then that I think that's okay.
Let's try to cover on a few more live. There's a lot of live, but a few more we'll take. Okay, you're on. Hi. You're muted?
Yep, they're muted.
Hi, you're on, Ben. Hello.
Let's meet him. Okay, let's
Okay.
put this person.
Okay, you're on.
Hi. A very, very simple question. It sounds like, from my understanding of listening to you, that this treatment particularly actually taps the unconscious mind in a very deep, extensive way. And from the way you've been conveying it for the last half hour, it sounds as if it essentially removes your body and your mind, separates the two, and brings you into an alternate dimension of thought and reality, which is just, the unconscious mind obviously, taps into feelings and emotions that are uncomfortable. And then you have the subconscious between the two of them, the barrier between conscious awareness. So
yeah,
is this like, for someone with experience with addiction and trauma and everything in between, is it something you recommend or not? This is, what can you just express on this particular, I guess, from this angle?
yeah. So the answer is, if a person's in an actual dissociative state, or has multiple personalities, or in a manic state, you don't want to do it. But if a person is grounded enough, then it is something that can be really a deep, profound, significant part, a breakthrough for many people in terms of their trauma work, in terms of their addiction work. It's not necessary if people are gaining. There are many other ways to, like I've said, to get to a lot of these different points through hard work, through consistent work, through mindfulness, through meditation, through somatic work, through EMDR. There are a lot of modalities that are effective for trauma, through good psychotherapy, through learning, through davening, that you can broaden your perspective and grow neural networks through exercise and through yoga, and they're all good. But in terms of going back to some deep trauma work where people can't access that on their own in other modalities, this is and is going to be in the future even more and more of a used and effective way to work with that.
Let me just ask you a question, just in addition to that. You revisit a certain state of the unconscious mind? Does it reinstate that in your existence, or it just essentially expands your perception of your own reality?
I want to understand your question. If you go back to a memory, then what does it do? So let me give you an example, and then maybe this will answer your question, right? So let's say you have someone who was sexually abused, right? So then on an MDMA session, one of the experiences can be they suddenly go back, they're hovering in the ceiling of that room, they can see themselves on the floor or in that area, where they were sexually abused, and suddenly they have a deep compassion for that little boy who's in that room being sexually abused. So they're going back to this memory, but they finally feel this deep compassion rather than this criticism or this self-blame. So there's this new, profound experience that now is how they experience that trauma. It's not just about the self-blame that they've had for the last 30, 40, 50 years, but now they're looking at that same experience suddenly with an open heart, with how a therapist would see, for example, that child, or how a friend would see that child. They suddenly see themselves in that way because they're out of themselves. They have this heart-opening experience looking at themselves in that type of a way. That can be an example of how the healing can take place on an MDMA session for sexual trauma. And they can be talking about that. Now I see myself, and they can start crying. What a simple, innocent, beautiful kid that child is, and how evil that person is. And I have such compassion. And this person can be crying while they're talking about that on the MDMA in the MDMA session. And therefore they leave that experience with a profound just sympathy and empathy for themselves, that they never had. Up until now, it was always that they were frozen, that they were harsh with themselves, or that they were frightened to go back there. And suddenly they didn't have any inhibition. They went right back. Well, they didn't go right back there, but what we're talking about in the session, that can be a small part of it. Okay.
Let me just add one very quick thing. I hear what you're saying. It sounds like in the step work of Alcoholics Anonymous, a part of the core foundation of addiction abuse comes from resentments, doing fearless moral inventory. So I would ask, what you just said sounds to me like you're going back, revisiting those memories, creating a reality in that part of your unconscious state, and coming to terms with it, and accepting and embracing what has happened, and coming back to your natural form.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Rabbi, let's take like one more, two more. So many questions. I'm sorry. The more they wants to understand it. Okay, you're on. Oh, sorry, I have to put them on. Hold on. Okay, you're on.
Okay. Hi, first of all, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Binyamin, for bringing up this topic. I just wanted to anecdotally advocate it, the therapeutic use of psychedelics for a second. I myself am a frum guy in my 20s. I have a family. And I had a hard childhood. I had a little bit of a hard past. And it wasn't, I never had an addiction, thank God, or really, really severe trauma, but definitely was holding me up a little bit. And I had the opportunity to experience psilocybin mushrooms and being watched and in a very safe location, etc. And it definitely changed my life for the better. I definitely got a lot more clarity. I recognized that I just had certain ways of looking at the world that was self-defeating and really holding me back. So I think a lot of people could gain from being aware of it and having the opportunity to use it. And I also just had a question. I don't know if this is being researched in the clinics, but I know that amongst people, it's something that is discussed or debated. Is there any conversation regarding microdosing? It means taking a small amount over a continuous period of time.
Yeah, that's not the focus of tonight, because tonight we're talking more about the psychedelic assisted psychotherapy piece. But there is a lot on microdosing, and that's more of a psychiatric piece being used in different ways. So I'm not gonna comment on it. I'm talking more about the psychedelic assisted psychotherapy piece. Okay.
Okay. Go to one more live now. They're on. Hi.
Yes, hi. I just wanted to go over a little bit and see if I understood it well. So you're basically saying that I understand the whole concept. So let's say you're saying that a person is starting off his life in a normal happy way, and then it comes certain things, that traumatic experiences or abuse or whatever, and then he fell under the problem, and then his life's starting to go crooked, and then he has to go for therapy and go back to that places and fix it where you went wrong. And you're doing it in a quick way. You're doing so it's basically a method to go back to that experience and fix whenever in your life you fell under your problem. So that's what I don't know if I understand well. I'm just trying to
right.
Not
necessarily, because what I would say is that the ego shuts down. The brain goes where it needs to go. Sometimes it doesn't go back necessarily to the memory to that specific thing, but just in and of itself, experiencing the world from a whole brand new place, where the person doesn't have the old patterns of thinking, of feeling, of seeing things, even if they don't specifically go back to a trauma, the self is felt differently and can move forward and feel different about itself, about emotions, about how it thinks and feels, moving forward, on its own. So that itself can be like with the terminally ill people in Johns Hopkins. It wasn't that they went back to any trauma specifically. They just felt different about their terminal illness because they had this experience of themselves as being larger than just their body, being one with the universe, and they felt infinite, that their death would mean, that not the end of themselves. And they really had a tangible experience of that. So it's not that they went back necessarily to a trauma. So it can affect how the person feels and sees their life, even if it's not going back to a specific trauma.
Sure, let's hop around one more, and then we're gonna go to. I want to ask you one more question, then we'll go to closing. Okay? Okay, go, Miko.
Okay, thank you. First off, thank you all for doing this. This is a fascinating conversation. I wanted to very quickly touch on 4 different things that were mentioned tonight. First off, a very helpful way to understand the different types of psychedelics is that psychedelic is actually an umbrella term, and there's subcategories. For instance, there's dissociatives, which include ketamine. There's empathogens, which include MDMA. There's hallucinogens, which are mushrooms and DMT. There are entheogens, there are deliriants, and so on. So not all psychedelics are the same. The second thing is that someone raised a question about ayahuasca and avodah zarah. So I've actually spoken to a Dayan who has given a specific heter for a traditional ayahuasca ceremony, provided some things were changed over Maris Ayin. But this Dayan doesn't want his name shared, but it's been discussed. The third thing is that Coach Menachem, I believe, asked, what if someone sees something or goes back to something that they weren't ready to? Now, I'm a therapist, I work with clients, and it's very important that our clients understand that they're in the present. And the reason that they forgot things was because that was a protection that they needed then. But if they can realize that they're now in the present, then that's a very, very helpful thing. And hopefully they're in the space where they can go back to that. And finally, just early on, it was kind of implied that these are new research is being done. Actually, some cultures have had histories of using psychedelics for at least several hundred years now, and specifically for healing trauma. So thanks again. I just wanted to share all that.
Sure.
Yaman, is he correct, or should we argue it out?
No, they're all wonderful and valid points, and I think that there's a big there's a lot of talk that we're not even talking about several hundred years, that was there use, what's the place of psychedelics? How old, are we, 1950s, is this the first time, or has this been around? And they want to say that that there was a place in the in the mysteries of Ulysses. They had ergot, which was like aspects of barley that they would put into their drinks that were already, there were psychedelic properties then. Was there any place in Yiddishkeit in the past that had any psychedelics? There's a lot discussed and written. Was there a place for this? Was there not? I know nothing, but there are people that are trying to write and research this, and definitely in other cultures this has been used. Thank you for bringing up those points.
I'm going to have one last question to ask you, and then we'll go to closing. If that's okay.
Okay.
Do you think this is a hypothetical question, just something that I'm thinking about recently, because I'm sure everybody can relate. We have family members or people that we know that are severely not well, bipolar, emotionally disturbed, maybe people that live in hospitals. I don't know, people have, we all have family members, people that are not well. Do you believe down the road, as they really fine tune these medications with more and more studies, and they're opening up the concepts of trying it, that people that people that would live a very crippling life because of their bipolar, because of their mental illness, once they fine tune some of these LSDs or something, actually have a hope of getting much more balanced? Or that once you pass, because you mentioned something like you would never do somebody who's like mentally not stable, put them into the office with ketamine, because that would be like rock the boat. But that's because we're just not holding there yet, and you could foresee it going down that road.
I'll tell you over. This is not Binyamin Tepfer. What the field is saying is that psychedelics are a game changer for psychiatry, for psychology, for trauma work. We're at the beginnings of this, but that's how people in the field are seeing this, that the potential is enormous. It doesn't mean that they're replacing therapists, the opposite, that they'll be needed more, but to do it correctly and to do it right. But these are medicines that in the right context, for the right people, used in the right way, are going to help a lot of people. For what, for how, I think that they'll develop much more specific ways of doing it. Which medicines are good for which stuff? They're not there yet, but I think that that's going to start. Protocols are going to start being developed more, and which medicines should be used for specific disorders. Yeah.
Okay, Marty. Okay, let's go to closing. There's so much more to ask, but let's go to closing. Okay, first I want to give a good shayach for coming on tonight. Tonight was a very hard topic. I don't think we ever really went down this road. This was something that was different. I think it was a tremendous chizik because people just don't know. I mean, me myself, literally a few weeks ago, I had no concept of this, and I think for people that can relate to it, or people that could benefit from it, it's something that people should know about. I think it should be, I think that's the point of doing this year, and we live in a big world, and we're trying to really open up people's minds and concepts. So, with not without the psychedelics, I'm just talking about Pashut, obviously, but I think it's a tremendous thing, and anybody that could benefit, anybody you think that could gain from it, definitely let them know about it, let them do research on it, and you know what I mean. That's number one. So Goshish Krech for Rabbi Yom Tov coming on tonight, giving his time. I think it's a tremendous, eye-opening for a lot of people here. Again, if anybody wants to join the WhatsApp chats, I can send you the flyers every Sunday. WhatsApp me at 848-525-0066, 848-525-0066, and save the number in your phone. And every Sunday, I will send you the flyer. Again, for anybody who's here the first time, every Sunday night at 9:30 Eastern time, we do a share. We have a lot of topics. You're a rabbanim, therapist. We bring on the best of the best. Rabbi Yom, that's why you're here. So I'm just letting you know. Next Sunday, February 6th, we're going to have an amazing share with Reb Chaim David Stark from Israel, the Mashgiach and Centers Yeshiva, talking about Kedusha in our generation, thriving in an unfiltered world. A deep conversation, understanding, Kedusha from the hearts, the eyes, the soul, everything to really what makes us special. So it should be a deep share. He's in Israel, so he's wake up 4:30 in the morning for it. Please, we could at least come at 9:30 at night. So if you can wake up 4:30 in the morning, so please join. Tell people to join about it. Everything is recorded. The Mashgiach will be on menachembernfeld.com, his website. If anybody has any questions, please email coachmenachem@gmail.com. And again, if anybody wants to get a hold of Dr. Binyam Tepfer, he's going to give you his personal home address and his cell phone number. But you can probably go to his website. What is it? Arbor Intensive. What's the website?
ArborIntensives.com.
ArborIntensives.com. Look him up, and I'm sure you can contact them through there. Tonight's share 89. And anybody wants to hear this on the phone, will be on the phone with Shem tomorrow at 848-777-GROW. Again, a special thank you to the Lakewood Scoop, Rabbi Yaniv Chazak, Chayla Kaufman, and Shmuel Summer from JCN, the Jewish Contact Network. And the Coach Menachem Show is collaborating with OK Clarity to bring greater health and wellness to the Jewish community. OK Clarity is the online platform for mental health support. The Jewish community, go to okclarity.com. Let's go to closing. Coach Menachem, you're first. Then Yamin, then we pass it to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Binyamin, for being here. I think it's a fascinating topic, and like you say, it's only the beginning. But we live in a world where people want things to happen fast. So they might think that this is the answer, but traditionally, we're here to work, and sometimes it's hard. Sometimes whether it's tefillah or some singing and dancing can take you to different places. Learning, like you mentioned, meditation. But for people who actually live in dark places and struggling with their whatever struggles they tried, whatever they tried and it hasn't worked, and this sounds like it's something that actually works. We are actually going to have in 2 weeks Reb Daniel Katz. He's going to be talking about how we can feel and go to these altered states in just without all these things, whether it's meditation. I also don't know. I'm wondering, hopefully he'll explain it, but he calls it supernatural. And it's the way, whether it's with Hasidus or with Musar or with his Baidados, whatever it is. So I think for those who don't need that, they're not hitting the wall, but they want to grow. They want to hear, they want to see more, they want to feel more, whether it's yourself, with Hashem, connection, davening, and learning. So stay tuned, Emir Hashem. So thank you very much, Rabbi Yom, for being with us tonight, and hopefully whoever needs it, Emir Hashem, they should get the help they need.
Okay, I just want to spell out Rabbi Yamin because people are texting, they didn't hear it clearly. If anybody wants to get a hold of Rabbi Yamin, it's Arbor Intensives. It's ARBOR INTENSIVES. You can look him up online and you could contact them via there. Rabbi Yamin, again, thank you for coming on. Please leave us with deep words. The floor is yours, as long as you want.
So just to end how it's similar to how we started, which is that when there's something that feels frozen, when there's something that feels like it's stuck, like that clock, so Hashem sends in the world things that can unstick, can break things open, and what that is in a person's life is sent to that person in many different forms, in many different ways, and in the history of the world it's sent. And I think that what's being uncovered now is that for certain people who need it, Hashem is sending into the world another means of allowing people who got frozen at 3:15 at that point or whatever it was in their life, and they haven't moved forward. A way that may help certain people, is going to be with the use of these medications. And I think that it can be done in a healthy, normal way, which is that we're not looking at it that I became one with the universe and God. These are, a person has to know every little journey comes to an end. In a dream, you can go to different places. No one's having dimyainus. It has to be done in a healthy, normal way, with a healthy, normal perspective, that the person understands that the imagination is going to be able to go to far off places, that they come back into the room and that they're still, walking out and getting wet if it's raining and holding their umbrella and still get hungry 2 minutes later for lunch, but they understand that it's able to just give a little taste, a little emotional experience of being in a broader place. And we can do that, like you were saying, not just this way, but all of us can open up our hearts more, can open up our minds more. We say anani b'merchav kad, with harchavas hadas. That's what we're trying to do. So these medicines allow people who are traumatized to have a heart opening and a harchavas hadas. And if it's used in that type of way, with davening, with siyata d'shmaya, hopefully it can help people. But all of us, even without using these things, can open up our hearts and can try to expand our minds and to become more one with other people and see the bigger picture of things. I think that's what we're all yearning, and our advice is to do it not necessarily with these medications, without that, and those that need it should get the help that they need with these medications. That's my closing thoughts.
Amen. Thank you so much. See everybody next week, same time, same place, Rabbi Center with Rabbi Stark. Looking forward. Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.